So in today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can do this or even this in SFM using only lights. So before we get started, there's two aspects of a light that I need to make sure you have a good grasp of before we get started with this, and that is the use of volumetrics in a light and gobo lights. So we'll start with volumetrics. To get a volumetric light, you just create any light like normal, right click it, and go to enable volumetrics. Now if I go and grab this light, you'll notice that I have this big smoky ball that's in front of it. And this is what the volumetrics are. You essentially are creating like a smoke effect that happens within that light. So this is where the light effect that's floating within the air. So the secondary part to this is going to be using gobos, which are essentially about giving shape to a light and using that to give shape to your object that you want to make. So to make a gobo light, you want to right click your light and go to set light gobo texture. Well, I already have some pre-created, so I'm going to go with the ones that I have. In this case, I'm going to load up a pentagram one that I have, but I won't cover in this tutorial how you would actually go about creating your own texture. There's plenty of tutorials out there as well that will cover that information, or just use some of the pre-installed ones that are on here. But do know that anything that is black in a texture is going to be invisible, not just black. So here I'm going to select my pentagram. So this is black on the outside and white for the shape. Hit open, and now you'll see that you can have that repeated texture over and over again on this light. So this is now stretched essentially a very, very, very long distance. So we want to scrunch this down to as tight of a margin as we can. And to do that, we're going to enable Uber light on the light. So if I right click the light, go to show an element viewer and light, and then you go over and check the box for Uber light, you shouldn't really notice any difference in the light. But what that did was it enabled some of the options over in your light to give you more control over some of the aspects of it. So in this case, there's a couple values that we're going to want to change no matter what. Near edge and far edge, you're going to drop as low as possible. Far Z attenuation, you're going to want to increase that as much as possible. And then what you're going to be doing now is playing with min distance and max distance and cut on and cut off. Min and max are about determining the cutoff of the light at the beginning and the end, but it also determines the start point and the end point for all the layers that a volumetrics makes. So you want that as tight as possible to ensure that your volumetrics are as good a quality as possible. And then your cut on and your cut off are going to give you a much sharper cut edge on both of those. So in here, if I start dropping down min and max, you'll start seeing this light kind of get pulled forward. And that is the effect we want. So if you get pretty close here, you start seeing kind of that object forming here. I'm also going to play with this cut on and cut off just to get kind of close. Let's see, we're just going to kind of make it rough here. If you are playing with a light that is much, much larger, much, much farther away, and you find that you're not able to utilize these numbers, or you can't get to this super tiny numbers that some of these might require at that size, you can right click these, remap slider range, and rechange this. So in this case, if I wanted to really narrow down, say, my max distance on this, I could right click this and just bring down this maximum, say to 300. So now I have a little bit more wiggle room on that slider to try to get it much, much tighter. All right, so now you're going to see the object kind of floating here. And as you can see with the object in the background, if you're not in the clip editor under the working camera, it is probably going to show up weird, and that is because it has to process the volumetrics to have them show correctly. So in this light, it's going to be the same way. It may not look right. From the front, it's always going to look the best, but from any angle, it might kind of look wrong, but that's fine. It's how it works for now. So here we're going to increase our volumetric intensity. That's going to really make it pop. Do know we are working with a light and not an object, so the brighter you go, it will start to glow. And so you probably want to find a balance for what you're looking for. But in this case, you can see that we basically have a floating object now. So if we want to see how this looks when it's actually rendered, we can take our camera, let's move it over here, go at an angle, and once we open the clip editor, well, and reduce our aperture here, you will see that now we do have a floating object. How sharp that object is comes down to how tight you are making those min and maxes, how thick this object is. The thinner it is, the brighter you'll have to make the light, but at the same time, you should have a better quality from an angle. And then you can take this concept and run with it. I've used it in the past for showing a pentagram for doing magic effects, but you can also do like here. I have a bunch of these, I think that's 4 of them, all different colors, and then just all locked to a single axis and rotating to create kind of like a fake light source object. And then here, I utilized 2 lights and then made their mins not the absolute minimum, created a little bit further out, used shadows to actually have an object, which you can't actually see, these ones, actually blocking the light as it's coming across, and kind of creates a transition effect. So the cool thing about these volumetric object lights is you can basically have the freedom to use them however you really want. So if you want to do neon light signs without having to make an object, that's a great way to do it too. So I hope that this tutorial kind of helped you out. Definitely play around with it, play around with the lights. You can spin them, change the color, change their distances. It's super flexible and it's great. So hope you found this helpful. I have a bunch of other tutorials on this channel. Please check them out and I'll see you next time.